I will be talking about Nordic collaboration and what sort of potential it has for the development of low carbon construction. So I think it's good to start from the carbon neutrality goals. As we all know, the European Union is aiming at carbon neutrality by year 2050. However, the Nordic countries are forerunners in this transition to low carbon society and green economy. Nordic countries in general have a much more ambitious plans for reaching carbon neutrality than the rest of Europe. And therefore, it is only logical that this is taken also to the built environment. 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, Nordic ministers who are responsible for building and housing made a joint declaration in Reykjavik, Iceland. And they said that the Nordic countries should become global forerunners in low carbon construction and circular principles in the construction sector. So this declaration from the ministers gave us, the workers at the ministries and all other authorities, a very strong mandate to work for the harmonization and for the improvement and of policies that are related to low carbon construction. And it's been very active, and I think that this has been one of those examples where we can truly see that there is an added benefit from joint Nordic approach. So what are we doing in practice? We are aiming at harmonizing building regulations, and this is not only about the low carbon approach. There is a general expectation or willingness to see which building norms could be made compatible. But the ones that deal with low carbon construction are new for all Nordic countries. So therefore it's logical to start from there, where we do not have a long tradition of certain approach to certain building regulations, and it would feel maybe difficult to let go of our own country's tradition. So there is a room for harmonization there. And therefore we have an authority working group for building life cycle assessment. I'm chairing it for the ongoing year. And this is for the coordination of policy development. So this is just for the authorities. And I think that there is a good spirit of open discussion about how could we go forward and what sort of problems have we encountered and what sort of solutions there are. Then we do have a stakeholder group, which is open for all interested parties. We normally extend the open invitation annually in the forums. And here we have reflections of forthcoming policy developments. And we try to keep our fingers on the pulse of Nordic stakeholders. So how do they foresee pros and cons of these and those details that are in the pipeline to be developed into building norms. So then we have an annual event titled Nordic Climate Forum for Construction. So this is once a year event, and we try to attract a larger crowd of all interested stakeholders, not only authorities, but also academia, science, the construction sector, designers, municipalities, and so forth. So the first of these events was in Malmö 2 years ago. The previous was due to COVID restrictions. It was organized by Denmark, but it was a webinar. And now this year, this autumn in September, we are hoping to be able to all gather in Reykjavik for a nice climate forum. So you can also already mark the 27th of September into your calendar. So to take this as a sort of preliminary information about the event. And then finally, we also have joint projects. There are two quite large and well-funded projects that are about to start this year. One is about circular construction, and the other is more methodological about life cycle assessment and life cycle data. So these will run for 3 years. And with the help of these projects, we are trying to harmonize even further. So if we have a very brief look at the current status in different Nordic countries, the countries presented here in alphabetical order, We can first see that there are differences in the national carbon neutrality goal years. Norway is going first in 9 years, then Finland and Denmark also has minus 70% reduction goal, then Iceland and Sweden. But anyway, we are more ambitious than the rest of the European Union. And then Denmark, Finland and Sweden have already set dates or years on when the regulation on low carbon construction would kick in. Sweden will start from the beginning of next year. There will first be a mandatory climate declaration, but no limit values yet. And then later on, year 27 or so, there will be also limit values. Denmark will then follow year 23, and they will have mandatory life cycle assessment and limit values, which will gradually get stricter and stricter. And then in Finland, we'll start before year 25. We don't know the exact year yet, but we will start with a limit value for all new buildings. So this is a rough overlook at what's going on in the legislative side. And all those of you who are interested in comparing what are the differences in different Nordic LCA methods, we have compiled a rather lengthy summary for you in this web address from the Swedish Life Cycle Center. You can access this table and have a look at yourself. Then a few words about levels. This is an initiative by the European Commission for making a joint pan-European framework for sustainability assessment of buildings. And this was launched last autumn, but there was a quite extensive pilot and testing phase before that. And it was great to see that actually 1/3 of all test projects came from the Nordic region. Especially Finland and Denmark were very active in the testing of levels, and this has given us a good position in further development and negotiations of how the level system could work. And surprise, surprise, it is again in discussions when the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is being revised at the moment. It's been allowed that should the levels method or some other way of calculating the whole life carbon of buildings actually be part of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which is of course an interesting idea. And all in all, I could say that Nordic countries are enjoying quite good reputation globally about sustainable construction. Our Minister for the Environment and Climate, Mrs. Krista Mikkonen, made a presentation at the Empire State Building some time ago, and she launched the call for action for bringing embodied carbon up front, which was coordinated by the World Green Building Council. So I think that the Nordic countries should take advantage of this positive attention that there is nowadays. And yet another thing to keep in mind is the cultural masterstroke from the European Commission. It's called the New European Bauhaus. And this is about revitalizing the tradition of the 100-year-old Bauhaus architecture and design school. I'm not talking about the hardware store with the same name, but about this legendary institute. And we have actually held a series of Nordic co-design events trying to figure out that what should be included in this new European Bauhaus. And with close to 2,000 participants from all Nordic countries, we have submitted our proposal to the European Commission, and we hope that this is going to be seen in the projects that will be launched under this new European Bauhaus umbrella later this year. And then a few words about what's going to happen in Finland about the life cycle assessment and low carbon approach. We, of course, are taking the whole life carbon limits for buildings into use before year 25, as I already explained. And in our approach, we will be looking at both carbon footprints or the emissions caused by the building over its life cycle and the carbon handprint, which is a joint umbrella term for those potential climate benefits that would not occur without the building project. And these, of course, are all based on EN and ISO standard ways of calculating. So we haven't made room for any greenwashing here. But I feel that it's very important to look at how to reduce the emissions and how to increase potential benefits. Otherwise, we have only half of the toolbox in use. If we're just looking at how to be smaller in the emission side, we must also be regenerative, in other words. And in Finland, we have been looking at what could be the potential climate greenhouse gas limits for different building types in Finland. It appears that the service buildings should deserve the highest quota, whereas residential buildings, schools, offices, commercial buildings could go for a smaller amount of emissions. And these are very initial ones, and this is something that we will be looking at more detail in the future. However, we have identified which parameters in our context and with our assessment method seem to play a key importance. So those things that can add considerably to the greenhouse gas emissions of a building seem to be, first of all, the requirements of the city plan, if there are certain requirements regarding the cellars or facade materials. They can add up to 13% of the emissions. Unfavorable foundation conditions are even more detrimental, and if you are obliged to stabilize the soil, that can be very bad for the carbon footprint of the building, as we all know. But then on the positive side, improving the energy class into the best A class can cut a certain amount of emissions. Wooden frame seems to be holding even greater potential, and even better yet would be a heat pump in the building. All in all, we can see that from those solutions that we have already in the market, we have a reduction potential of over 40% if we combine all of these. So it seems rather positive, although we do need further development. Then let's get back to EU's carbon neutrality goals and the Nordic approach to that. I think that we could set carbon limits for buildings in relation to Nordic climate plans and our national energy mixes and Nordic climate conditions. And here's something that we could consider together. And therefore, these Nordic climate forests have offered a very good potential for jointly thinking about these things and considering of how to take these into account. And that has been very, very welcome. So from my viewpoint, if we were to think that what can be the benefits of such Nordic collaboration, I would say that it's much more resource efficient, of course, to think about these problems and potentials jointly. That gives better quality while improving the speed. And then, of course, this improves the compatibility of policies and enables a wider stakeholder engagement. And I think it's also important to recognize that if we can settle these things in the Nordic countries, then we have one voice in the European policy development, and which gives us better conditions of influencing that side. And that's fairly important as well. And I'd like to close by just pointing out some of the financial potential that's out there. It seems that the green construction and real estate markets are growing strongly all across the globe, especially in Asia. And the expected amount of investments in 10 years into green buildings appear to be in the range of $25 trillion. So that's a staggering amount of money. And when the Nordic countries are already in the forefront of climate action, and when we are embedding this into our construction policies, so that should give our companies a good head start to compete in these markets. And really hoping that this Nordic policy development and collaboration would turn also into profitable, climate-smart business in the future. So this is all from my side. Thank you. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer to those.
Wow, that was a really great overview, Matti, and I'm happy we are recording this because we will have to go through it several times. I don't see any direct questions in the chat, but I have one for you, and that is, how do you see that, I mean, how will Nordic collaboration benefit the value chain, the individual, you know, the developer, the product the developer, etc. So we have a lot of doers with us today, so that's why. How do you see it benefit the value chain?
Yes. Well, I think that when we have a joint Nordic discussions and joint Nordic stakeholder forums, such as the climate forum that's coming up, that enables the different actors in the value chain to exchange ideas on how their role is changing in the future. And of course, this gives possibility of alleviating the fear and uneasy feelings that what will happen to my company or my profession or my business. And it also can help us to identify new opportunities that are there in the future. So I think that change is inevitable, because I'm sure that nobody expected us to get away from the climate crisis by doing nothing. Of course, we need to change. And this, when we think this jointly in the Nordic level, this gives us a better starting position for the change that's inevitably ahead of us. But I would like to, from a policymaker viewpoint, I would like to think that the thing that we are setting on our own markets, we are setting rather strict requirements that would give our companies and our experts much better starting position in the international markets and in the international competition. So I'm hoping that this can be seen as a positive intervention, a positive development that's about to happen.
Could you also say a little bit about how the Nordic countries can affect and push the development within the EU?
Of course, through the usual channels. There are lots of stakeholder forums at the moment regarding, many of you know, the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. I've been talking there, I believe it was this week, about this embedding this whole life carbon assessment into the directive. So that's one channel. Then, of course, we have the revision of the EU's construction products regulation, which is an important thing. And then we have the taxonomy for sustainable finance. And of course, we have the revision of the green public procurement specs regarding the buildings from the Commission starting this year. So there are lots of different things happening there. And I think that whenever we have Nordic summits and Nordic forums from which we can draw statistical data and say that, yes, we had, let's say, 250 participants and 82% of them say this and this and this. So that's much stronger signal to the Commission's policy developers than if it's just some Matti from Finland saying that, yeah, I would like it to be like this.
Mm-hmm. And then the final, maybe not final, but one more question for you from Marianna Wallsten, who's asking, what is the main idea behind the EU Bauhaus initiative? Is there a theoretic relation to the original School of Architecture?
Well, the original school doesn't exist anymore. The Nazi regime of Germany closed it down year 35 before the Second World War, so there is no organization to negotiate with, but the legacy is of course there. And I think that's the connection to today's problems in the built environment is very interesting, because so far we have tried to solve the resource efficiency crisis and the climate crisis and energy sufficiency in the built environment mostly through eco-technical interventions. But I think that we can't get as far as we would need to go without having the latent potential of architecture and design and culture. Because we need to change the way that what we think is good living, and we need to envision a better future, and we need to be able to change our consumption and behavioral patterns as well. And that's hard to do just by looking at Excel sheets. So it's easier to bring in the architects and designers so that they can design it so that it's a positive change. So I'm very much looking forward to this cultural side intervention into this common quest of ours.
And also, it's a very interesting follow-up to, in the Circular Economy Action Plan, one of the first statement was we design cities, and that's also where we decide on the emissions and waste material use. So I think we will need to move on.